But today we're going to be talking about high impact board retreats. We have our guest Lori. You're going to get to know her in a little bit, but here's an overview, just a quick map of where we're going. You're going to meet Lori. We're going to talk about why we suggest an annual board retreat, what makes it impactful. We'll give you some top tips to really maximize that time at the board retreat. And we always do question and response. So if you have some questions, if anything spurs a thought, feel free to take a note. We will address those. And then we'll announce some other things that we have coming up later this month and later this year. So with all that, Kent, you want to introduce us to our guest today?
I would love to introduce Lori. And, I was thinking this morning about how am I going to introduce Lori Gero? And there just isn't enough time. But here's what I want to tell you. We've known each other for a lot of years, longer than she remembers, longer than she'll admit. But Lori is a high impact fundraiser. And I was trying to remember this morning, we're preparing for the upcoming board retreat. This is like the fifth or fourth, I don't know.
At least fourth, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, nobody else has suffered. I mean, has enjoyed that many consecutive board retreats with us. But as the Chief Development Officer for Catholic Charities of Eastern Oklahoma, she's making a big impact, both directly and indirectly, through her work. And Lori, as we start off, I just want to say a great big thank you to you for making time for this today, because today it's all about Lori. And I hear from reliable sources that's just kind of the way life is with Lori. It's always all about Lori. But our topic is high impact board retreats. And here's one of the things I've learned from working over several years with Lori. If you're going to do a board retreat with Lori, number one, it's going to be fun. Lori, you recognize that picture?
Yes, you might need to explain our outfits. So
yeah, so actually for last year's retreat, one of the things that we did, we used an adventure theme because we were really breaking some new ground with the organization. So everybody came in their favorite adventure gear, and I guess Lori didn't want to be seen because she's wearing camo. But yeah, there's going to be a group picture, and there are always some people in the group who didn't read the memo about what to wear. So Jesse, he's always going to have a suit and tie on, right? But great time with a great group. This is only part of the ones that were there. There's always going to be a lot of work, and I'm not going to comment anymore on this particular picture, but there's always going to be a really tall guy in the room, not always this tall. And if you want some details on the backdrop, feel free to ask me or ask Lori. But one of the things that we wanted to start off with, and this is going to be kind of a dialogue, but the question of why an annual board retreat, and Lori, I know you guys have used the term board summit, but why is it that you feel like this time away is so valuable that you do it year after year?
Oh, are you asking me right now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the Lori show.
I think it engages the board, and it's just some time to devote, where sometimes you have a board meeting where you've got an hour and a half. This is a day that you don't have to rush, and you can really dig into some things. And we didn't always do a board retreat. We've probably done the last 6 years, possibly, I guess. And I think that our board has really, really come a long way. It's a really cohesive group. And it could be that part of that is the board retreat. Since we've done the board retreat, it's really helped in so many different ways. But building those relationships is a big part of that.
Yeah, so actually, I want to ask a quick feedback question here. So if your camera's on, let me just ask you to put your fingers up in front of the camera. We're going to do some exercises here real quick. Okay, so hands down. First of all, by show of hands, who serves on a board? whether it's the organization that you're representing right now, who would you say you are a member of a governing board of some kind? Okay, get those hands up there where we can see everybody's. Okay, hands down. Who serves, and this may be an also question, but who serves a board? You serve a board, but you're not actually a member of it. Who would say you fall into that category? Okay, Conrad's waving at us. Good, good. Okay, hands down. And then one other question I want to ask on this topic. Who would say that you have a tradition in your organization of having some kind of a board retreat, a summit, some kind of a more intense time away on, let's say, every 12 to 18 months? That's your current tradition. Okay. Yeah, so we got a lot of variety in the room. Actually, back to that previous question, why an annual retreat? Aaron, any additional thoughts that you want to share on that topic?
Yeah, I think it's good just to be able to step back from the daily grind and see the big picture and look out ahead. You know, do some vision casting and dreaming big, and sometimes creating that environment just makes it a little easier to do that, both as an individual and as a team.
Yeah, really well said.
Yeah, big question. I would probably throw back to Lori is, you know, when we think about the board retreat, what makes, we want it to be impactful. We want it to be meaningful and something real, some real change to come from it, you know, not just hold hands and sing Kumbaya. And so, you know, Lori, what would you say really is a X factor, or makes a big difference when we talk about a board retreat? What makes it impactful?
That's a good question. I think that keeping focused on the future and not getting bogged down into the details of something that's happening right now, but looking out into the future, where you want to be, using that time. That's where the board can have the most impact, is if they're thinking forward.
Okay. Kent, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's Laura, you mentioned that you felt like that some things had elevated significantly for your organization over the last few years. One of the things that I think has made an impact, number one, the board's been really intentional about this, and the board leadership has been dedicated behind it. They've been present. I mean, there's always people who, for whatever reason, aren't able to be there, but I've been impressed by the attendance level in your organization. So showing up makes it impactful. To me, another thing that makes the board retreat impactful is, I think on a month-to-month basis, the board does the work. At the retreat, we delve into how we do the work and what is it that we're doing that we shouldn't be doing. What are the things that we should be doing that we're not? It tends to have a lot more evaluation and application off of the agenda, rather than just being kind of that same agenda month after month after month after month. Any other thoughts on the impact, Laura, that come to your mind?
You know, I think that, I mean, we've definitely had some dysfunction on our board. I mean, you saw a little bit of that early on.
Are you referring to me?
Well, we won't go there yet.
Okay, not yet.
But, when we did the first board retreat that you did, we've one of the things we've done is we've incorporated a board meeting, our regular board meeting, as a part of the retreat. And the very first one that Kent did for us, we had some board members that only showed up for the board meeting, and they marched in at 1:30 for the board meeting, and they marched out. And it was kind of a bummer, actually. But I think that what they've realized is that they enjoy it, and that it is a really important time, and we don't have anybody doing that anymore. So I think the fact that they're showing up, and these are really busy people, not, they're out, they're leaders in the community, and they're making a 6-hour block in their schedule to be there because they want to be there. And thinking about the mission, I think focusing on the mission is an important thing, and just taking the time to really think these things through a little more deeply.
Yeah, boy, as you mentioned that, it brought some memories back to mind. And yeah, you guys have done some huge change in those years since that first retreat. Yeah. And by the way, if you have thoughts, comments, questions, feel free to drop them in the chat box. If they're really easy questions, Aaron and I will answer them. All the others are going straight to Lori. Congratulations, Lori. It's kind of fun as I look on the screen, I see others where we've done retreats in one form or another. So I wonder, one of the things we asked Lori is if she'd be willing just to share some of her top tips. And Lori's given some thought to her tips. We're going to share those here in just a minute. Then Aaron's going to do the same, and then I'm going to share some as well. But Lori, if we go to your list of tips, you're nice enough to share those in advance, but you want to just talk a little bit about your top tips and unpack that a little bit for us?
Sure. So I would say that we're learning as we go. So these are a lot of the things that we've learned, and we're still learning. So one of the first things I thought about was the benefit of bringing in an outside person, because you get in your boardroom and everyone has their personalities, and you kind of get into this way of thinking, and maybe a little bit, it feels a little stale. And so having an objective person, and I would advocate for Kent. He brings a lot of objectivity, and he has just got a great positive attitude. And so it's a nice break to have something different. And so I think for some objectivity is nice to have an outside facilitator. Then one of the things that Kent did was he continually does is he takes the time to know who the board members are. So if you have someone in your community that that could be helpful in that position, it could be someone else that's an outside objective person, but Kent took the time to know, to understand the personality, not the personalities, but just the different people on the board. How do you pronounce their names? So he came prepared, and everyone felt welcomed, and it was easy for everyone to welcome him into the meeting. So that's been a really good thing for us. I would say that I wouldn't want to do one of these without an outside facilitator now that we've done it. And then I would say building consensus with the board on what do we want out of this day. So we actually had a Zoom meeting yesterday that Kent helped facilitate, but we had our executive committee. So we had the chair of our development committee, we had the chair of our governance committee, our chair of the board, and our chair of the finance committee. And they all talked about what they would like to see out of the day. And it's interesting because they're all coming from different places. And so we got a lot of different answers of what they wanted. Some people wanted to talk about how we communicate with each other, how we can improve upon that. Some people want to talk about our programming and some changes going on there. And some other people wanted to talk about our strategic plan. And so we'll have to figure out how we incorporate all those things, but you know, they have the buy-in. It's their day, and you want it to be their day. I think that it's tempting for me to, as the chief development officer, to have my own agenda for the day, and the things that I think that they need to be working on. And I'm sure I'll be able to get some of that in there. But I think that it's the most important that it's their day and they feel like they own it and they're going to be more invested that way. And then thirdly, keep it interactive. So Kent helps us do that a lot of different ways. One of the fun things, we usually try to start it off in a fun way. Like, for instance, last year, you saw the picture of us in our adventure outfits, and not everyone, some people were coming from work and they didn't have their costume on, but the ones that did, I think, enjoyed it. And then we can ask everyone to pair up with someone they didn't know as well, and then to share a story with their partner about an adventure in their life, because we were in this adventure kind of a theme, or was it adventure? Was it expedition, or
Yeah, something like that.
and so they spent 5 or 10 minutes telling their stories, and then they each told the story of the person they were paired with. They told that other person's story to the group. And I think that all these things are really important in building team and building camaraderie, and just, you know, keeping it interactive. And another thing we did was last year we were developing our 3-year strategic plan. And so we divided into committees, and each committee broke down their particular part of the strategic plan, and then came up with measurable outcomes that we want to hold ourselves to. So there was some very vigorous discussion, and came out with just what we needed. We were done. Like, we've got all of our measurables there. So it was time really well spent. And I think everybody was engaged. And I think because of that, they want to stay and they want to come back, and they feel good about their role as a board member. They feel like they're contributing. Fourthly, allow social fun time. So, you know, I already mentioned that, the little exercise we did, but just, I think it's nice not to be in a hurry, but to let people have some conversations, and maybe try to mix it up, get them to maybe sit in a place, maybe by someone they don't know as well, but you know, make it light, and make it meaningful, but also allow some fun time, because this is, I think, a really key component of a board retreat, is building the camaraderie on the board, because if you have that, then they're willing to jump in and support each other and support the organization much easier, much more than they would have otherwise.
Wow, these are all great tips, and I would just say, Lori, you're not giving yourself enough credit. She's a great leader within the organization, but we've had a few questions asked, and I'm going to put those out there. And Lori, I want to give you the first opportunity to respond, because I think, just from my own experience with you, I think you've got a lot to say. But Rachel, and by the way, hi Rachel, great to see you. We had an opportunity to do a board retreat together. Wow, was that this year? I think it was earlier this year. But she asked this question: how do you build up to the retreat? How do you get them to buy into the retreat? And again, Lori, I want to go first to you, because, and I'm going to make this quick comment. One of the objectives that Catholic Charities had is, they said, we want to create an organization, a board, that's a top 10 board in the community. And this is in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So when Lori shared a little bit about the profile of their board members, again, these are top leaders from throughout the community, and very few absences. I mean, a sizable group, top leaders. So how do you build up to the retreat? How do you get people to buy in?
Gosh, that's a really good question. I think it takes a little time. And it may take that you do this a couple of times before everyone realizes that what a powerful tool it is. I think sometimes building your board and is hard, and we've gone through some really tough times trying to build our board to what it is now. Originally when I first came to Catholic Charities 8 years ago, we had 28 people on the board, and we had some people that were pretty disengaged, and there was some dysfunction and some different things. And we sort of, led by our leadership at Catholic Charities, worked with the board and the board leadership to try to change those things. And it was not pretty, but it happened. And we have a smaller board now. We have 19 on our board now. And I think it's interesting because from a development standpoint, I think it was hard because you want people out there being ambassadors, you want a lot of people, you want people fundraising, but I've seen the value of that. And so we have a smaller board and we have the right people on the board. And sometimes it takes some work and some time to get the right people on the board. If you don't have, sometimes you don't have always the right people on the board, and it may be hard to engage them in a board retreat, and maybe they're just not going to engage. But I think that it just takes doing this and really planning well and communicating through your committees, and the expectation that we need you there. And it's we're not going to drop in and say hello, but we're going to spend the day, and it's going to be a great day. And just set your expectations, and don't be afraid to do that, because I think sometimes we're afraid to say, we expect you to come the whole day, because we don't think that people are going to want to do that. But I think if we set our expectations high, then people will be more likely to those expectations.
Yeah. So, that was one of my thoughts, expectations. And for those of you who are on staff, I want to say this is it's not your job to get the board to the board retreat. It's a board retreat. And so one of the things that we do is we want to make sure that the invitation is voiced usually from the board chair, because whether it's Lori as Chief Development Officer or Kevin as CEO, I don't want board members saying no to them. If somebody's going to say no, I want them to say no to their peer, the other person who's on the board. And then the other thing is one of the things that Lori has done a great job with, and that is choosing a location that if you don't come, you're going to miss out, because you didn't get to go there, and you can't just go there anytime you want to, right? I mean, we did, remember that one retreat we did? We were coming out of the pandemic. Nobody was doing retreats yet. We did one, and it was a very special community location. And actually, it's the only time I've ever been in that space. And I know that was true for some other people. So leverage what you do have to get what you don't have. Let the place, the time, if sometimes it makes sense that there's something special about the food. Are people going to go out of their way for food? No. But if that's just one more thing, we're going to have our private chef do it this time. Actually, at Catholic Charities, one time we had the chef from the food program do the meal. So make sure that every factor is tipping the scales in that direction. Now, another question Eileen asked, you include staff in a board retreat where you're forward focusing. And Lori, again, you want to just share what your advice would be on that?
Well, I think it's worked for us to do that. We typically have our CEO, our CFO, me, the Chief Development Officer, and then one of our development team that works with the board as well. So those people are at the board retreat because they typically work with the board quite a bit.
So limited staff involvement.
But I almost want to say, like, we're there, but it's their day, so we're not trying to jump in too much.
Yeah, and actually, I think in a lot of ways that kind of chimes into a question that Jessica asked: how do you keep members out of the weeds and thinking of the big picture instead? Any comments or thoughts on that, Lori?
I think that that's always a challenge, but if you set the agenda to be out of the, set the agenda to be out of the weeds, then, you just have to sometimes continually maybe lead the topic back to where it needs to be, I guess. I think you're probably pretty darn good at that, Kent. What would you say?
Well, so it's not that I'm so good at it, it's that my position allows me to. And that's one of the reasons why your first tip about using an outside facilitator, it's very difficult in a room full of peers for one peer to tell the other peer, we have to go here or we can't go there, right? But as facilitator, part of my job is to read the room, to know the agenda. And, if we're hearing, for example, if we're hearing one voice too much, it's my job to deal with that and to not alienate people, not embarrass them, not humiliate them in the process. But there are some things that I have to do that if I was a member of the group, it would be impolite for me to do it. But as the outsider, I can do it and get away with it. And I don't mean, kind of get off, but it goes with the role. So I think that's that is crucial. And if you've ever been in one of those settings where somebody hijacks the thing, what somebody said, there's the curse of functional politeness, that as when we're all equal, we're all code members, or even worse, the staff, the staff can't scold the board back into behaving in a certain way. So again, that's just part of the whole role thing. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And let's see, we've got one more question really quick. And I don't know, Laura, if you have a response to this, or if not, Aaron, maybe you or I. Michelle asks, how do you structure a startup nonprofit board retreat? Do we have anybody who's been there for the first retreat for your board? Yeah, Rachel, I was thinking that was first. I'm just curious, Rachel, do you have a thought or a tip? I know it's kind of putting you on the spot, and feel free to say no. But any comments?
Well, I guess what I would say is what I learned is to get more buy-in from the beginning. I love her idea of having them help set the agenda, because I'm not sure with our group has changed a lot since then, actually. I'm not sure how much a difference that would have made, but it might have helped impact. And we structured it. We actually, Kent and Aaron came in and they helped us a lot with leading that retreat. It was a good day. I think it really helped the board members that did come really buy in and understand, and just get more into our mission. And I think it energized the ones who were there, and the ones who didn't come heard about it. So, yeah.
Yeah, Rachel, that's a great point. And on the earlier question, how do you get people there? First time around the job, our job from an internal standpoint is first to create something that you'll want to come to. And then secondly, we want to create regret. And that's ask everybody else to make sure that those who weren't there are sorry they didn't come after the fact, and they'll be sure and show up next time. So Lori, do you have a thought on this question in terms of the first time board retreat, a startup?
Gosh, I think if you haven't done it before, then relationship building is probably a really good part of that. So spend some time with that. But I think for me, just getting it on the calendar and
Hmm.
forcing yourself to get it done. And that way you'll have to get it all organized, as opposed to putting it off because you're not really sure how you're going to do it. It's just, and get some good help and some objective help, I think would be a good thing.
Okay, thanks for that, Laura. Aaron, you've got some tips. You want to kind of unpack what you've got?
Yeah, I got 3 that I threw down there. Some of them are overlapping, but the first one is I think there's huge value going off site. I think the environment that you build for the board retreat really helps create the vibe for the day. Sometimes getting out of your own element into a new element literally helps you think differently, helps you think more creatively. So go off site. And then as we've been talking about, I think every board's goal, every organization's goal should include, man, we want to have the #1 board to serve on in our community. And so sometimes the location of your board retreat can help dictate that. You know, I'm in Kansas City. Usually when people ask me around here, hey, where should I hold my board retreat? I mention some of the big stadiums around. They all have a board suite that overlooks the field. And even if there's not a game going on, it's kind of cool to show up and have a board retreat in the Super Bowl champs stadium, or, you know, in the Royals stadium. And that'll also create, yeah, it creates a desire and the culture for people to want to serve on your board. Secondly, have fun. I know Lori mentioned this, but there's one, it should be fun. It should be fun serving in a nonprofit in any capacity, but especially in the board. And then on a relational aspect too, relationships can really be built and deepened around an element of fun. And I'm not just talking about the stereotypical, you know, let's do a trust fall or, you know, team building exercise that you might find at an obstacle course, but there are some ways that you can integrate a lot of fun into what you're doing and how you're doing it. And it can be productive to the overall goal as well. So don't be shy to integrate fun into the board retreat, even though the word board can imply something else. Fun board retreat. That's how it should be. And then the third one, it's healthy balance. But as the retreat goes on, there needs to be some really good dialogue and debate. The board should be dealing with stuff that isn't an easy answer and that everyone's voting on the same way on. There, these should be some items that cause a little tension, cause a little friction. Maybe the board's divided on it, and that's the work of the board to really flesh through all that. When I say healthy balance, you don't want one person to dominate the conversation. You don't want one person to be there and everyone else is the yes man. You know, they just vote yes based on what that person says. You want some good balance there. You want to be able to contend, to throw ideas around, to challenge in respectful but very clear ways. And that, that healthy tension leads to some really good productivity. So having that healthy balance, no one should be playing the card of, well, I'm the CEO, therefore I'm the board chair, therefore I trump all. You should be able to challenge and spur on one another, ask for clarity, throw different scenarios, play the devil's advocate, all those things. When you bring that healthy balance in, I think it leads to a really good, productive board retreat. So those are my 3 tips. I think you have some for us too, don't you, Kent?
Yeah, boy, I tell you what, when you asked me for tips, man, I thought I had some good ones, but you guys have taken most of them. But one of the things I'll share just from the beginning, and actually somebody asked a question in the chat box, what's the ideal length of a board retreat? And that's part of the right time. Here's what we find is you want to avoid the extremes, not too much, not too little. So it's a Goldilocks board retreat. What we find is the right time is where we've got 6 hours of really productive content time. So if we don't count the breaks and the meals, if we have 6 hours, then that's long enough that we can actually get something done. And it's short enough that we haven't overstayed our welcome. People aren't totally exhausted and disengaged. To me, the other feature about the right time is somebody asked about how to get people there. You want to give them enough time that they can make it on their calendar. I know there are some organizations that schedule these things actually a year in advance, and they ask their board members, as a member of the board, we are going to have this board summit or board retreat. Here's the date. And we want to ask you to make every reasonable effort to be able to be there. So that's the right time. The second one's the right space. Probably one of the biggest mistakes I see in board retreats is they're in a room that's big enough for everybody to sit around a table and not move. And it's no bigger than that. And so don't do that. I tell people that figure out how much space you think you need for a comfortable group of this size, and then at least double it, someplace between 2 to 4 times of that. That's how much space you need. And Laura, you made reference to this, but movement matters. And we're going to do things that get people up on their feet and moving around. Rachel, remember we did an exercise that involved a brick wall. But when we move, we think differently. And so make sure that if we're going to err either way, have too much room. There's no penalty for too much room, but probably the worst retreat I've had was in a chain hotel. It was like a Hampton Inn conference room. Their conference room was almost big enough for a family dinner. I'm telling you, it didn't leave room for us to wiggle around either mentally or physically. So the right space and then the right content. And Laura, you touched on this earlier, and that is I have nothing to bring from a content standpoint. I want to know what the pulse is in the organization. What are the needs? What are the opportunities? What are the obstacles? And then we're going to build the agenda around that and then deliver content. But the best content doesn't come from Aaron. It doesn't come from me. It comes from the room. And our job is to draw it out. And so those are kind of my 3 top tips, and wish we had a whole lot more time, but this is a 47-minute webinar and we got to save time to hear everybody else's questions and top tips. And so I'm trying to think if we've missed any of the questions. I think we've got most of that content. Does anybody have a new question or something that you'd like Lori to respond to, or Aaron or Ken?
There's one question that was asked: to what extent should staff present on programs, year-end goals, or other topics?
Lori, what would you say?
I would say that would not be something that I would be wanting to do.
Yeah, so very limited. And one of the things, pre-engagement, we like to ask, put things in front of board members that engage them in the process before they get in the room. And so it may be a report. If there's a report, push that out in advance, ask people to review it. And what I like to do with a staff report, so let's say it's there's something that needs to be emphasized from the fundraising report that Lori created. We're going to break into some teams and have a fundraising team review her report and bring 2 or 3 key points out of it. People will listen to peers differently than they listen to staff. There's no disrespect to Lori or the job that she does, or most of the people on the call. It's no disrespect to you. It's a positional thing. So if a point needs to be made, let somebody else's voice make that point for you. Leverage their voice.
Yeah, and I'll jump in there and say one thing that is probably been unspoken or implied in our minds, but hasn't been said in any of the tips or on the webinar yet. But part of having a great board retreat is having a good board culture with really good and productive board meetings as a part of the regular cycle of the board. And when you have when your board meetings are productive and on point, probably no one's going to want to have any of those reports or anything, because they're already up to date on the current pulse of the organization, using the retreat for things that don't happen on a monthly or whatever your board meeting frequency is.
Yeah, really good point. This is such a great topic, and we could spend more than 47 minutes on it, but we're dedicated to our time frame. And in the chat box, I'd love for everybody just to take a really quick moment and put in one takeaway, something that you feel like you can put to use in your organization, whether it's for your next retreat, for the meeting you're going to have this afternoon, or for life in another realm. In the meantime, it's all about Lori. So if you're in the Tulsa area, or if you need an excuse to come to the Tulsa area, 2 days from today, Lori's going to be part of a panel at the Association of Fundraising Professionals meeting on speaking on corporate stewardship and with individual donors as well. So, Lori, I'm going to be there cheering you on in the audience that day, and want to make people aware of that. Aaron, what else we got coming up?
Well, we have an Asking Academy coming up in just a couple weeks. We have one at the end of this month. We have our last one for the year is coming up in October, I believe. So if you haven't signed up for the Asking Academy, or if you don't know about it, let's connect. There's information at the askingacademy.com. And I haven't told you this, but I had a conversation earlier this morning from an Asking Academy graduate. Their fundraising over this past year doubled from the year prior. So it was cool. We weren't on the phone to talk about that, but she shared that with me. She's a CEO, and something to celebrate. So if you want to increase revenue from your donations, major and mega donations, let's talk about the Asking Academy. And we have another 47-minute webinar coming up. We're going to be talking about the advice visit. Secrets of the advice visit. It's going to be presented by Kent Stroman. So you're definitely going to want to be there for that. That's on Tuesday, August 8th, same time, 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. So we will make sure we communicate that to you, but go ahead and put that on your calendar, Tuesday, August 8th. And it's 10:47. I know some people were talking about their big takeaways, the agenda, doing something fun, having a good place for it. Glad that this has been helpful to you, helpful for you. And we want to say thank you for logging on today and joining us for the 47-minute webinar. Wishing you the best success with your boards and governance. And if there's anything we can do to help in the process, feel free to reach out.